Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody. How are we doing today? We're going to continue reading good old Beelzebub's tales to his grandson, picking up from where we left off, chapter 24. Now, if you would like to help out with these streams or support the channel, please do. You can do that via a one-time donation through PayPal or by going to the Coffee account and sending a little something through there. Also, there's YouTube memberships, which, depending on which one you go for, there's one that allows you to get a hold of a little Telegram chat room where you can talk to me directly. Yes. So thank you for joining us. We'll be going through Beelzebub's Tales. If you want to use the same PDF I'm using, follow along. I'll be using the PDF found on gurdjieff.thework. I'm not sure, you can't actually see the the thing, but it's just gurdjieff.thework, and it's this site here. Just scroll down to the bottom, go to the library, and in primary texts, you'll be able to download this PDF. Now, where are we? We left off with Beelzebub's fourth descent. Do I have my little... I don't really need these headphones, but I'll put them in anyway. Beelzebub's fourth descent. He's been descending to Earth back and forth to try and study why humans kill each other, the peculiarity of their psyche. And so I think last time he went and he got a whole bunch of apes and brought them to the planet Saturn. So now we're gonna talk about his fifth descent now to the planet Earth and what crazy adventures he gets up to. So, let me just move something around here. Ooh. Oh, I'll do that later. Chapter 24. Beelzebub continued to relate as follows. After my fourth sojourn on the surface of the planet Earth, many years again passed. During these years I, of course, as before, sometimes attentively observed through my tescuano, his telescope, the being existence of these favorites of yours. Once again, he's talking to Hassien, his grandson, hence the name of the book. And we're the favorites of Hassien, so that's always nice to know. During this time, their number considerably increased, and they had already populated almost all the large and small terra firma parts of the surface of this planet of yours. All the continents were inhabited. He doesn't really talk much about the Americas. He's mainly talking about the continent Ashak, Asia, Africa, Europe kind of thing, or mainly Asia, really. And of course, there also continued to proceed among them their chief particularity, namely, from time to time they destroyed each other's existence. Yep, that's what it's all about. So, for those remembering from last times, the reason why he's investigating this is because when a creature dies, they release a skoken into the atmosphere, which is kind of food that ascends to the moon. But also there's a kind of a reciprocal nature of the whole entire universe, the law of autoegocratic law or whatever. So the whole idea is humans randomly destroy each other all the time, and because of that, a surplus of a skoken goes to the moon, and then it makes the moon go funky, and then because everything is interconnected, it has certain implications for the rest of the universe. So Beelzebub has this fascination with why do humans kill each other, to try and figure out how to restore balance to the universe, basically. During this time, that is to say, between my fourth and fifth visit, great changes occurred to the surface of your planet. Many changes also occurred there in the concentrations of the places of settlement of these favorites of yours. For example, all those centers of culture of theirs on the continent Ashak, which I believe is Asia, where I had been in person during my previous descents upon the Earth, namely the countries of Tikliamish and Maraklesi. So, as we've established previously, Tikliamish seems to be prehistory Babylon, or, that kind of area. So, Sumerians, Then there came the Akkadians, and then the Assyrians, and then the Babylonians, and then there were some Neo-Assyrian empires and the Chaldeans and stuff. But that roughly area where Babylon was, prehistory, so pre-Sumeria, we don't have any historical evidence, but prehistory there was a culture called the Tikli-Amish culture, according to Gurdjieff. And the same for China. This is where China, or that kind of the Asiatic center. Mara Plessy is prehistory Chinese culture, basically. Or whatever the culture was that's prehistory China. So perhaps the Yellow Emperor was a descendant of Mara Plessy or something like that. Had by the time of my 5th arrival there entirely ceased to exist. So on Beelzebub's 5th descent to the planet Earth, now we're in history. In history. The cause of the destruction of these centers of theirs, and of the changes on the surface of this planet in general, was again a misfortune. Why? The third for this ill-fated planet. So what was that? We got there was kind of Atlantean catastrophe, but then there was a bunch of Atlantean catastrophes. So what is it? The one where Atlantis fell was the second one. Maybe Lemuria was the first one. Atlantis second, and then there was a third misfortune, which are the great winds, I believe. This third misfortune was entirely of a local character, and occurred because during several years there had proceeded in its atmosphere unprecedented what are called accelerated displacements of the parts of the atmosphere. Or, as your favorites would say, great winds. Man, these guys just don't know how to package concepts into neat categories. Well, actually they do, perhaps. That's one of the problems with the language. Anyway, the cause of these abnormal displacements, or great winds, at that time was once again those two fragments which had been separated from this planet of yours during the first Great Calamity. So the first Great Calamity was the Comet Condor slamming into Earth, creating the moon. The second was the fall of Atlantis, the Great Flood cataclysm. And this third one is apparently a great winds that displaced many different things and created a lot of deserts where there should have been, I guess, paradises. Great, and which afterwards became independent small planets of this solar system, and are now called Moon and Anulios. So Anulios is the dark moon, which is too small for our telescopes or the telescopes then to see. Strictly speaking, the main cause of this terrestrial misfortune was only the larger of these separate parts. So basically the moon messes everything up, and Anulios just... the smaller fragment, Anulios, played no part in it whatsoever. So Anulios is just chilling. Anulios the Dark Moon is just in the back there being like, hey y'all, what's up? And our big moon just keeps on making troubles. Keeps on sending people crazy, apparently. I blame the werewolves. When the atmosphere on the small accidentally arisen planet Moon had been finally formed, and the moon, according to the already mentioned law of catching up, continued to fall back upon its fundamental mass by the path already then established, so there's some kind of physical interplay, like the moon is trying to exert itself, but then it kind of falls back towards Earth, but it also wants to move out and become a planet, so it's caught in between these two forces and just ends up being in a fixed orbit around the Earth. The moon presence, so yes, and this newly arisen definite presence on the moon had, and he's also saying the moon has a thin atmosphere that is crystallizing on it. So this is his cosmology, slightly different from other cosmologies, like I believe Blavatsky had the moon as a dead planet. It used to be living and now is a corpse, whereas Gurdjieff has the moon as a kind of an egg that's going to be a planet in the future. Completely opposite cosmologies they have. The moon had not yet acquired its own harmony within the common system harmony of movement. Then the what is called osmualnian friction, which was to say not harmonized with the whole. I think that's the first time he ever mentions that. Hopefully the last time as well. Evoked in the... take a shot whenever I mispronounce something. Evoked in the atmosphere of the Earth the mentioned accelerated displacements or great winds. These unprecedented great winds then began, by the force of their currents, as it is said, to wear down the elevated terra firma parts and to fill up the corresponding depressions. So mountains were destroyed and corresponding depressions, so the valleys were filled up. Such depressions were also the two countries of the continent Ashak upon which the process of existence was chiefly concentrated, of the second and the third groups of beings of contemporary Asia, that is to say, the main parts of the countries Tikliamish and Mariplesi. So Tikliamish and Mariplesi basically became deserts. So these regions here, so perhaps this was where Mariplesi was, and maybe this is where Tikliamish was. And then Pearl Land down here kind of just survived, they all chilled. At the same time, sands also filled up certain parts of the country Pearl Land as well. So Pearl Land is India, so around here the sands came in from the north. And also prehistory India, like, you know, Indians just like, yeah, this is India, but India used to like cover a large, let me go down, sorry. India used to be way kind of larger in different parts of history, specifically, you know, the Indus River Valley civilization used to kind of be a part of that, and, you know, all that kind of thing. Like, you know, chakras, apparently, the oldest evidence that there is in history of chakras is in, I think, the Indus River Valley civilization. There are some ruins or cave paintings with people with chakras on them, people in a sitting position, and there's 6 chakras drawn on them. So all of this may have been a part of India. So this here was kind of prehistory India, and it got filled up, became a desert. Here, Mariplesi got nuked and got turned, this is perhaps where Mariplesi was, got nuked and turned into desert, and perhaps here, that's where Tikliamish was. As well as that country in the middle of the continent, Grabonsi. So Grabonsi is Africa. So he says there used to be a country in the middle of it and got turned into a desert. I guess, where would the middle be? Like here where Niger or Chad is? Because Chad, the whole thing with Chad is a lake. Chad just means lake. And there used to be a like mega huge lake in the middle of Africa, but it's gone now. Hey, Ciro says, hello, all caps. Hey, Ciro, how's it going? Did you check Exoria? Oh, shit, no, I don't think I did. Maybe, if I did, I forgot. I've forgotten it already. I'll have to check it again. Yeah, so Grabonski also, it seems, was destroyed. Whereas I have already told you there was formed after the loss of Atlantis what they called the leading center of culture for all the 3-brained beings there, a country which at the time was the most flourishing part of the surface of this planet of yours, and which is now the desert called Sahara. So directly after the fall of Atlantis, you got all of these, you know, in Americas, you probably got some kind of Atlantean remnants in the Americas as well. But directly after the fall of Atlantis, you have some in Tibet, you have some in India, we had some in Mariplesi, prehistory China, Tikliamish. But apparently the main center was in Africa, but then that center just got completely displaced. Very interesting, and is now the Sahara Desert. So underneath the Sahara Desert is secret post-Atlantean ruins. Bear in mind also that during the abnormal winds of that time, besides the countries mentioned, several other small terra firma spaces of the surface of that hapless planet were also covered by sands. It is interesting to note here that your contemporary favorites have also by some means or other learned about the changes that then occurred in the places of the permanent existence of the 3-centered beings, and having made a label for this as well, this time, the great transmigration of races, they stuck it onto what they call their knowledge. A number of the learned They are now puff and blow with all their might to find out why and how it all occurred, so that they can tell everybody else about it. Oh my. Just now there are several theories about the matter there, which although they have nothing in common with each other, and are each in an objective sense more absurd than the other, are nevertheless accepted there by what is called official knowledge. But in fact, the real cause of the transmigration of the three-scented beings there was that as soon as the said abrasion began, the beings living on the continent Ashak, fearing to be buried by the sands, began moving to other, more or less secure places, and these migrations of the three-brained beings there proceeded in the following order. Most of the three-brained beings populating Tikliamish moved to the south of the same continent, Ashak, to the country which was later called Persia. There you go. The rest moved north and settled in regions which were afterwards called Kirk-Ischeri. Kirk-Ischeri. Maybe the stands. So Tikliamish broke into pieces. Some went south, found Persia, and some went north. So northern regions may perhaps preserve some old Tikliamish stuff. As for the beings populating the country Maraplesi, one part wandered eastwards, while the rest, the majority, went towards the west. Having crossed the eastern heights, those who went east settled down on the shores of the large Seleucoriapnian spaces. So Seleucoriapnian spaces are water spaces, so oceans, and this country was later called China. Yes, so Maraplesi then got nuked, and actually, so is it here in the Gobi, or is it around there maybe? Wherever Maraplesi was, some went east, created China, and some went west. And what did the western people go? And that part of the beings of Maraplesi who sought safety moving west after wandering from place to place ultimately reached the neighboring continent later called Europe. There we go. Robert Sefer fans, eat your heart out. Prehistory, Europe and China are connected. So was this? Exorial is a kind of Lovecraftian novel. Oh, that's right, by Gregor A. Oh yeah, I think you remember you telling me this, Sarah. I think you will enjoy reading it. It's just a bit too... Okay, yeah. That's the problem. That's probably why I didn't end up looking it up, because I couldn't find an English version or reading it. If you can find an English version, just, I don't know, go to the Telegram and post it there, and I'll give it a read. That sounds very interesting. Good old Fraternity of Saturn. I don't know, if I read the novel, I get possessed by Gotos. Anyway, back to the book. Let's not go on to too many tangents. I think this is also going to be a long chapter. And the three-brained beings, who then still existed in the middle of the continent Grabonsi, so this is Africa, dispersed over the whole of the surface. And so, my boy, this fifth descent of mine in person... So, whole of the surface, what does that mean? So the Africans just dispersed everywhere. Maybe they went to Australia, Indonesia. There's, the Toltecs, the big Olmec heads you find in South America. Maybe that's like post-collapse of Grabonski. So they also went and dispersed in all directions. And so, my boy, this is Beelzebub talking to Hassian, this fifth descent of mine in person to your planet belongs to the period of the time after this said redistribution of the groups of the communities of these favorites of yours. And the causes of my descent there in person were the following events. I must first tell you that the chief peculiarity of the psyche of your favorites, namely the periodic need to destroy the existence of others like oneself, interested me more and more. So there you go, he wants to study human psychosis. With every succeeding century of theirs, and side by side with it, the irresistible desire increased in me to find out the exact causes of a particularity so phenomenal for three-brained beings. And so, my boy, in order to have more material for elucidating this question, which interested me... let me just check. whatever. Sorry, I was just checking something else. Fourth sojourn onto the planet, I've organized my observations through the Tescuano from the planet Mars of the existence of those peculiar three-brained beings in the following way. I deliberately kept under observation quite a number of their beings from among your favorites, and during many of their years either I personally or somebody whom I commissioned observed them attentively. Take a shot, trying as much as possible not to miss anything, and to clear up from every aspect all the peculiarities in their manifestations during the processes of their ordinary existence. And I must confess, my boy, that when I happened to be quite free, I sometimes, during the whole synonuums, or as your favorites there approximately defined, the corresponding flow of time hours, yeah, sure, followed with great interest the movements of the said three-brained beings there under observation, and tried to explain to myself logically that what are called psychic experiencing. Logically, they're what are called psychic experiencings. Okay. And so, during these observations of mine, from the planet Mars through my Tescuano, it once flashed upon me that the length of their existence was century by century, and even year by year, becoming shorter and shorter, at a very definite and equally uniform rate, and this served as the beginning of my further quite serious study of the psyche of these three-brained beings, who have taken your fancy. So our lifespans are getting shorter. Since Atlantis fell, they've been diminishing over time. And of course, when I first noticed this, I at once took into account not only the chief particularity of their psyche, that is, their periodic reciprocal destruction, but also the innumerable what are called illnesses, which exist exclusively only on that planet, the majority of which, by the way, arose and continue to arise owing to the same abnormal external conditions of the ordinary being existence, established by them, which help to make it impossible for them to exist normally up to the sacred Rascuano. So Rascuano is a degree or like a level of being. And our lifestyle itself creates illnesses, both psychic and physical, which hinder us from reaching the Rascuano level. But if we reach the Rascuano level, then it would also clear up the illnesses. So, it's a catch-22. We're just screwed all around, all up and down. We're just so messed up. God damn it, humans. Hi, I'm confused, says Rose. Yeah, so this is... we're all confused, Rose. We're all confused. I'll try to explain as best as I can as we go through, but the gist of this story is Beelzebub is on a spaceship with his grandson, and he's telling Hassian, his grandson, all about humanity, our history, and our peculiar psyche. And through this, embedded in this text, there are going to be secrets for our development. Whenever he mentions being bodies, that's when we get excited. That's when we get excited. Now, when I first noticed this, I began to recall my previous impression about it. Each of the separate, independent, spiritualized parts of my whole presence became filled with the conviction, and my essence perceived the mentioned flash, that in truth these three-brained beings of your planet had in the beginning existed according to their time calculation for about 12 centuries, and some of them for even about 15 centuries. So in Atlantis, we were all everyone lived at least a K. We all had 1,000 years under our pockets. Man, imagine just we must have wasted so much time just not developing being bodies. Now we have 80 years? Because you can't really do it as a kid. So you got to at least, say you get to 20 and you start the work, then you live to 100, you got 80 years to crystallize higher being bodies before you die. And we used to have 12 to 15 centuries, but now we don't. Oof. To be able, more or less clearly, to represent to yourself the rate at which the length of their existence declined during this time, it is enough for you to know that when I left this solar system forever, the maximum length of their existence was already from 70 to 90 of their years. And laterally, if anybody should exist even as long as this, all the rest of the beings of that peculiar planet would already consider that he had existed quite a good long time. Ugh, imagine being 90. Sucks to be us, Rose. Yes, sucks to be us. And if anybody happened to exist a little over a century, he would be exhibited in their museums. And of course, all the rest of the beings there would know about him because his photograph and descriptions of the manner of his existence, even to the enumeration of each of his movements, would continually be found in all their what are called newspapers. This used to be way bigger than it is. I swear when I was a kid, it was always like, old lady turns 105 and she'd be on the news. But nowadays, I don't know. It's just, we've forgotten the elderly. And it's just all about TikTok kids now. Unless your grandma can still dance on TikTok, then people care. But nowadays they're just like, nah, get that old person out. I don't want to think about death. I just want to, just want to watch my reels in peace. Anyway. And so, my boy, since at the time when I suddenly constated such a fact there, I had no special business on the planet Mars, and it was quite impossible to try and probe this novel peculiarity by means of the Tescuano, okay? So his business concluded on Mars, he had some free time, and he was like, you know what? Let's make a descent. Let's check it out personally. How old is the oldest guy alive today? I don't know, man. How old is the oldest guy today? Oldest living human in the world. Maria Morera sounds like an anime character. She's 116. Oh, poor Maria. Damn. Oldest living person in January 2020. She's probably already dead now. Anyway, I therefore decided to go there myself, in order perhaps to clear up for myself, there on the spot, the causes of this also. Ciro says 125. Damn, who's that? Ugh. I mean, wasn't there like a Taoist person who was supposedly lived to like 210? Some old Chinese immortal guy they found, and he just ate goji berries and honey and was like, just be happy, just live well. And that's the key to longevity. But yeah. Anyway, several Martian. Well, we gotta stay focused. We gotta stay focused, guys. We gotta plow through. Several Martian days after my decision, I again ascended there on the ship Occasion. Okay. Also, remember, Beelzebub's ship is called Occasion. So, on occasion, he would go to the planet Earth. Ha 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 ha. Very funny, Gurdjieff. At the time of this fifth descent of mine, in person to your planet, their center for the incoming and outgoing results of the perfecting of being rumination, or as they themselves call it, their center of culture, was already the city of Babylon. So it was just there that I decided to go. So Babylon became the next center of gravity for the human race. Oh, North Secret Adventures. Oh, that was you on the old Facebook. Sent me that, man. Okay. Glad you could come along to the live stream. Let's see what's up. Now, this time, our ship Occasion alighted on what is called the Persian Gulf, because we had ascertained through the Tescuano before our flight that for our further traveling, that is, to reach the town of Babylon, and also for the mooring of our ship Occasion itself, the most convenient place would be that same Celia-Coriapnian space. Damn straight. I nailed that. Of the surface of your planet now existing there under the name of the Persian Gulf. So he descended, his spaceships love the Persian Gulf, is what he's saying. This water space was convenient for my further traveling because the large river on the banks of which the city of Babylon stood flowed into it, and we proposed to sail up the stream of this river to get there. I assume his, spaceship, had a mirage function and turned into a little boat. He doesn't say that, but I assume. During that period of the flow of time, this incomparably majestic Babylon was flourishing in every aspect. It was a center of culture not only for the beings dwelling on the continent Arshak, or Asia, but also for all the beings of all those other large and small terra firmas which were adapted to the needs of ordinary being existence on that planet. Thank you for your descriptions, Gurdjieff. At the time of my arrival there, in this centre of culture of theirs, they were just preparing that which was afterwards the principal cause of the acceleration of the rate of the degeneration of their psychic organization, especially in the sense of the atrophy in them of the instinctive functioning of those three fundamental factors which ought to exist in the presence of every three-brained being. Namely, those factors which give rise to the being impulses existing under the names of faith, hope, and love. That's interesting. Faith, hope, and love, that's the, not the Trinity, but those are the specific virtues of Christianity. Well, I mean, Gurdjieff says, this is what I teach is esoteric Christianity. What's the symbols? Faith, hope, and love, like the cross, the rose, and the anchor or something? Yeah. Faith as a type of knowledge, hope as a type of yearning, and love as the force that unites us and cleaves us to God. And these are so he has them as being impulses that also naturally arise in us. So perhaps that's why they have it as a teaching in certain traditions, because back in the day when we were less degenerated from the Kundabutha organ, just allowing these being impulses to, what would you say, exert themselves naturally in us may have been enough. But now we're too corrupt, and the being impulses, our psychic organization doesn't allow these fundamental being impulses to exert themselves. These being factors degenerating, so let's see what he says about this. These being factors degenerating by heredity, take a shot, from generation to generation has brought it about that instead of a real being psyche, such as should exist in the presence of every kind of three-brained being, there now already exists in the presences of your contemporary favorites, although a real psyche also, a real psyche, nevertheless one that can be very well defined by one of the wise sayings of our dear Mullah Nasser ad-Din, which consists of the following words: there is everything in it except the core, or even the kernel. So we are missing a core, a center of gravity within ourselves. What we are, fundamentally, are a bunch of attributes slapped on top of us that move about arbitrarily. We are our family, we are our friends, we are our society, we are a set of opinions that are added to us and leave us arbitrarily. And what we need is, funnily enough, it is a trinity. These things are connected to creating a core within us. So we need to bracket all that stuff out, and we need to find our core. It is absolutely necessary, or perhaps find our core, to build our core. It is absolutely necessary to relate to you in as great detail as possible what occurred during that period in Babylon, as all this information may be available material for you for a better elucidation and transubstantiation in your reason of all the causes which together have finally given rise to the strange psyche of the three-centered beings which your contemporary favorites already have. I must first of all tell you that I obtained the information concerning the events of that time, which I am about to relate chiefly from those three-centered beings there, whom the other beings call learned. Before going any further, I must here dwell a little on just what kind of beings there on your planet the other beings call learned. Rose, sounds a bit like Steiner finding the Christ essence within our... there's some weird overlaps between Gurdjieff and Steiner. I don't think Steiner ever learnt much about Gurdjieff. I don't think Gurdjieff thought much of Steiner. He's too theosophic. But there are some interesting overlaps. Like if you've read Steiner's Knowledge of Higher Worlds, the first chapter on, wonder and cultivating wonder, is some of the stuff, his takes are very similar to what Gurdjieff says about self-remembering. Cyril says Beelzebub is the engineers of alien Prometheus. Yeah. Well, actually, no. Beelzebub isn't the engineer. There's the Sacred Commission. Sakaki and Luisos are the aliens from are the engineers from Prometheus. And actually, what's Romulus? I haven't seen Alien Romulus. I don't know what happens. The point is that even before this fifth sojourn of mine, that is to say, before that period when Babylon, as I have told you, flourished in every respect, those beings who became learned and were regarded by others as learned were not such beings as become and are regarded as learned everywhere in the universe, nor such as first became learned even on your planet. Namely, such beings as acquire by their conscious labors and intentional sufferings the ability to contemplate the details of all that exists from the point of view of world arising and world existence. So he's saying a true being that is learned you would call them learned because they have direct knowledge of world arising and world existence. They are learned because they have direct knowledge of these principles or laws, owing chiefly to which they perfect their highest body to the corresponding gradation of the sacred measures of objective reason, in order that they might later sense as much about cosmic truths as their higher being body is perfected. So a true learned being... Oh, sorry, did I go down? Oh, come on. There we go. Yeah. Cosmic truths as their higher... Oh, my mouse wheel sucks. As their higher being body is perfected. So the deal with this is he says they're learned beings. He's saying they're not learned beings because they don't have higher being bodies. And for us, the higher being bodies we're able to crystallize, our then higher being bodies give us the potential to intuit or interact with cosmic truths that are usually inaccessible to us. And this gives us knowledge of world creation and world maintenance. I prefer, I'm not sure if this is a translation thing, world arising and world existence. Usually it's world creation and world maintenance. But from time to time, of what is called the Tikliamishian civilization until now, those beings, especially the contemporary ones, chiefly became learned, who learned by rote. So hence, people who we consider learned aren't really learned. Why? Because they don't directly know things, they just read it in a book. As much as possible about every kind of vacuous information, such as old women love to relate about what was presumably said in olden times. Note, by the way, that for the definition of the importance of the learned there, our venerated Mullah Nasser ad-Din also has a sentence expressed in the following words. Everybody talks as if our learned know that half 100 is 50. There on your planet, the more of such information, one of your favorites mechanically learns by rote, information he himself has never verified, and which moreover he has never sensed. So you never verify it, you never sense it, you just watch it, you read it, you absorb it. The more learned he is considered to be. So basically Twitter. And so, my boy, we reached the city of it. That's basically what Twitter is. It's just a bunch of learned people all arguing with each other. Twitter is the Tikliamish of our days. So, my boy, we reached the city of Babylon, there where indeed a great many learned beings there gathered, from almost the whole of that planet of yours. As the causes of the gathering of these beings in the city of Babylon at that time are extremely interesting, I will tell you also about this in a little more detail. A little more in detail. Yeah, I know I think that would have been translated better if they said in a little more detail. Just completely criticizing someone for something that I could never do. Now, the point is that most of the learned beings of the earth had been then assembled there under compulsion by a most peculiar Persian king, under whose dominion at that period was also the city of Babylon. So maybe he's saying Cyrus? Or who's the guy? Anyway, who's the king of kings, Persian king? Whichever one. In order to understand thoroughly which fundamental aspect ensuing from the total results of the abnormally established conditions of ordinary being existence there gave rise to the said peculiarity of this Persian king, I must first enlighten you in respect of two facts which had become fixed long before. So the Persian king was weird, but he's got to tell us two things before he tells us why he's weird. Hipsters of Babylon would be a cool band name. Hey, that would be a cool band name. I'll play synth. What are you guys going to do? Who else is joining? Now, no, moving on. The first fact is that almost from the time of the loss of the continent Atlantis, there gradually began to be crystallized, and during later centuries became completely crystallized in the presence of every one of your favorites there, a particular inherency, thanks to which that being sensation, which is called happiness for one's being, which is experienced from time to time by every three-brained being from the satisfaction of his inner self-evaluations, appears in the presences of your favorites exclusively only when they acquire for their own possession a great deal of that popular metal they're called gold. So, need gold, make feel good. He's basically pointing out that unfortunate psychic trait. A great misfortune for them arising from this particular inherency in their common presences is that the mentioned sensation, due to the possession of said metal, is strengthened by the beings around the possessor, and also by beings who learn about it only by what is called hearsay, and have not themselves been convinced by personal corresponding perceptions, and it is moreover the established custom there never to consider through which kind of being manifestations he becomes the possessor of a great quantity of his metal, of this metal, and such a being there becomes for all those around him one who evokes their presences, the functioning of that crystallized consequence of the property of the organ Kundabuffer called envy. Jesus Christ. So the whole thing there is people get gold because it makes feel good. And then because they have gold, they also get it. He says that they get it in ways that may be unethical, but it also evokes envy in other people, and that just makes them feel better. So keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah. That whole making other people desire you industry. Basically, he's also it's Instagram. It's Instagram. Gold is likes here. Think of it as Instagram likes. And he's just like, it's all running off envy. Oh my god, Instagram. Using Instagram develops the Kundabuffer organ. It all makes sense. It all makes sense. And the second fact is this, that when in the presences of your favorites, their chief particularity functions crescendently? No. Give me the Y. What the hell does this mean? Meh. Did he just make up a word? Or is this just like really out of favor? What does it mean in the context? And the second fact is this, that when in the presences of your favorites, their chief particularity functions crescendently. Is that maybe like a mistranslation? Or crescent? So if we think of it as transcendentally, we would think of it as higher. A crescent is what? Something that goes... So our... Oh, maybe something goes over your head, or they don't get it, or... Oh... And according to the established custom among their different communities, the process of the reciprocal destruction of each other's existence proceeds. Okay. Okay, so I think envy evokes in people a desire to extinguish other people's being presences. Let's go with that. Let's keep moving. Let's move forward. Then afterwards, when this property, only maleficent for themselves, has run its course, and they temporarily cease these possessors of theirs, then the king of that community, in which a great number of subjects survive, receiving the title of conqueror, usually takes for himself everything belonging to the beings of the conquered community. Okay. Yeah, maybe crescendo. It sounds like he's just saying like what kings do. A faction goes into another country, kills everyone, takes their gold, and the survivors, come back, and the king is called a conqueror. That kind of thing. Such a king conqueror there usually orders his subjects to take from the conquered all their lands, all the young beings of the female sex present in the conquered community, and all the what is called riches accumulated by them during the centuries. So he's just talking about the, what usually happens in war. And so, my boy, when the subjects of that said peculiar Persian king conquered the beings of another community, he ordered them not to take and even not to touch any of these, but to take with them, as what are called captives, only the learned beings of this conquered community. So this Persian king had this weird peculiarity in his psyche that made him attack other countries, but instead of taking young women and gold, he would just take the learned beings of that community back to, and that's why Babylon became a center of culture. That's funny. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see what's up. Let's see where this is going. Clearly to represent and to substantiate in yourself the understanding just why such a peculiar craze arose in the individuality of that Persian king and became proper only to him, you must know that at the period of the Tikliamish civilization in the town called Chiklarol, a three-brained learned being by the name Harnahum, that sounds like a Saturnian name, like he should be a crow person, whose essence later became crystallized into what is called an eternal Hasnamusen individual. So we'll learn more about this later, but the Hasnamusens are like cosmic abortions, people with a wrong crystallization. And there are different types of Hasnamusen, but some people can get higher being bodies, so they can become eternal beings, but they can still Hasnamusenize themselves and crystallize wrong even after getting certain higher being bodies, which makes them even dangerous. So this guy ruined everything, and even before he was an eternal Hasnamusen, and then later his essence crystallized and still became an eternal Hasnamusen. Crazy. God damn. It's all Babylonian. I blame Babylon. It's individual. Invented. So what did he invent? He invented that any old metal you like abundant on the surface of that planet could easily be turned into the rare metal gold. And all it was necessary to know for this was just one very small secret. Ooh, okay. So this is the beginning of Puffer-style alchemy. They don't care about eternal life or the universal medicine or any of that. They're just like, gold. Give me the gold, baby. And it's all because of this one guy in prehistory Babylon ruined everything. This maleficent fiction of his became widely spread there, and having become crystallized in the presences of the beings of that time and being transmitted by inheritance from generation to generation, began to pass to the beings of subsequent generations as a gradually formed, definite, maleficent, fantastic science there under the name of alchemy. Under the name, that is, of that great science, which had indeed existed there during those epochs long past. Okay, so there was a real alchemy. But then later on, making gold actually got attached to alchemy as a degeneration. So when in the presences of their ancestors, the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer had not yet been quite crystallized, and which branch of genuine knowledge might be useful and indeed necessary for the three-brained beings there, even of contemporary times. So that's really interesting. So we have this perspective that alchemy used to just be about making gold, and then in modern times, people started saying, oh, well, actually, there's a secret kind of inner alchemy. And nowadays, there's this kind of half-half thing where we look back and we're like, no, alchemy was definitely a physical science. There may have also been definitely internal tantric components to it. But what Gurdjieff is basically saying was, and what people argue more over nowadays, not that it was one or the other, but they argue what came first. So people say it was they say from what we have, the manuscripts that we have, it was clearly physical first, which, I don't know, maybe European alchemy, but that's a bit dubious. but yeah, the idea is they're trying to say it's like it was physical first and then became spiritualized later. But Gurdjieff here is basically saying it was a real spiritual science first, and then became the gold stuff got connected to it later. Which, in that kind of way, as mysteries and esoterica goes, that may also be a good thing. Like, you can deliberately attach that onto a sacred science. Why? Because then people's greed will, assemble every single, like, the alchemical literature that would have been lost, they will keep. And they may have it for impure intentions, but they're never going to succeed. And so they perpetuate this literature through time that would have been lost otherwise, all because of their greed. So masters, by using the greed of man, can figure out a way to perpetuate certain teachings through time to reach people in the future that they may never have been able to reach otherwise. So there's weird silver linings to, many of these things being mixed together, or for false alchemy and real alchemy to kind of be unfortunate twins that are bound together. Anyway, reflections aside, let's keep it going. And as at that period to which my tale relates, this Persian king needed for some or other of his undoubtedly Hanasmusian aims, so the Persian king himself was a bit of a Hanasmusian, a great deal of this metal, rare on the surface of earth, called gold, and as the notion concerning this method that had been invented by the then existing Hanasmusian individual, Harnahum, had also reached his presence, he was eager to get gold by so easy a means. So we had this Hanahum guy kind of whispering into the ear of this Persian king, like, yes, get me the gold and I will transmute it for you, or whatever. Or, you need to do this kind of thing. That's what it seems like he's saying. Anyway, or at the very least, Hanahum's ideas had permeated the Persian king's mind. When this Persian king had finally decided to get gold by alchemy, he then and there for the first time cognized with the whole of his being that he did not as yet know that little secret without which it was absolutely impossible to fulfill this desire of his. So he then pondered how to find out that little secret. The result of this pondering was that he became aware of the following. As the learned already have knowledge of every other kind of mystery, then this mystery must also be known to one of them. So it makes sense. One guy must know it. Having finally arrived at such a conclusion, he, with an intensified functioning of being astonishment at why such a simple idea had never entered his head before, called several of his attendant subjects and ordered them to find out which of the learned beings of his capital knew this mystery. When it was reported to him the following day that not a single one of the learned beings of the capital knew this mystery, he ordered inquiries to be made also of all the learned present among the beings of the whole of his subject community. And when after several days he again received the same negative reply, he once more began to ponder, and this time very seriously. His serious thinking first led his reason to the understanding that, without any doubt, one or other of the learned beings of his community was aware of this secret. Also, but since among beings of that clan, this strict keeping of a professional mystery was very strongly developed, nobody, of course, was willing to reveal it. Good boys. The result of his serious thinking was that he became aware that it was necessary not merely to question, but to examine the learned beings about this mystery. The same day he gave appropriate instructions to his nearest corresponding assistants, and the latter already began to examine, after the manner that had already long before been the way of power-possessing beings to examine ordinary beings. Are they torturing them? I feel like he's torturing dudes. And when this peculiar Persian king became finally convinced that the learned being of his community indeed knew nothing about this mystery, he began to look for learned beings in other communities to whom this mystery might be known. As the kings of other communities were unwilling to offer their learned beings for examination, he decided to forcibly to compel these unconquered kings to do so. Hence where we're at. And from that time on, at the head of numerous hordes in subjection to him, he began with their help to make what are called military excursions. This Persian king had many hordes in his subjection to him because of, at that period, from the region of the surface of this planet of yours where that community was situated and over which he had happened to be king, there had been intensified in the presences of the beings, even before this time, according to what is called the foreseeing adaptation of great nature, the what is called birth rate. And at the given period there was being actualized that which was demanded for the common cosmic trogo-auto-egocratic process. I've said that so much, oh my god. That is to say, from this region of the surface of your planet, there had to issue more of those vibrations arising from the destruction of being existence. This is interesting. So different regions of the Earth issue different vibrations, and that causes more people to be born, but also more wars to happen. Huh. During his last explanation, ooh, Hassian interrupted. We're getting someone else speaking besides Beelzebub. What a rare and novel thing. Interrupted Beelzebub with the following words. Dear grandfather, I do not understand why the issuing of the required vibrations for the purpose of the actualization of this most great cosmic process should depend on a definite region of the surface of the planet. Yeah, good question. Keep in mind that Beelzebub was originally telling us about his fifth descent and that he went to Babylon and that there were a lot of smart people there, and he just went on this huge tangent telling us why there were smart people there. So let's see if he goes off on another tangent. To this question of his, Beelzebub replied as follows. As before long, I intended to make the special question of those terrifying processes of reciprocal destruction which they call wars the theme of my tales concerning the three-brained beings of the planet Earth. It is better to defer this question of yours also until this special tale, because then I think you will understand. Oh, so he's deferring it till later. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Having said this, Beelzebub again continued to relate about the Babylonian events. R.I.P. Maybe we'll come back to it. Maybe we won't. Let's see. When the peculiar Persian king I mentioned began, thanks to the hordes in subjection to him, to conquer beings of other communities and to seize by force the learned among them, he assigned as a place for their congregation and existence the said city of Babylon, to which they were taken in order that this lord of half the then continent of Asia could thereafter freely examine them in the hope that one of them might perhaps happen to know the secret of turning cheap metal to gold. Yeah, so he's just continue along this narrative. He got all the smart boys and examined them to find out if they knew the secret. With the same aim, he even made at that time a special what is called campaign into the country Egypt. So he even stole boys from Egypt. He then made his special campaign there because the learned beings of all the continents of the planet were assembled there at that point, the opinion being widely spread there that more information for their various sciences was to be obtained in this Egypt than anywhere else on the planet. I went to Egypt last time as well, and there was some interesting structures being built there. So this Persian king conqueror then took from Egypt all the learned beings present there, both the native and those who had come from other communities. Among their number were also several called Egyptian priests, descendants of just those learned members of the Society Akkaldin, so the Atlantean society that studied the 7 branches of objective science, which we learnt about last time, who had chanced to escape and who had been the first to populate that country. When a little later a fresh craze arose in the presence of this peculiar Persian king, the craze for the process itself of the destruction of the existence of other beings similar to himself, and which supplanted the former craze, he forgot about the learned beings and then began to exist there freely in the city of Babylon, awaiting his further directions. Okay, so he just got a bunch of people, they didn't know anything, and then he was like, meh, and then just went off to do other things. So just left a whole bunch of smart boys together. I wonder what's going to happen. The learned beings collected in this way, there in the city of Babylon, from almost the whole of the planet, used often to meet together and of course to discuss among themselves, as it is proper to the learned beings of the planet Earth, questions which were either immeasurably beyond their comprehension, or about which they could never elucidate anything useful whatsoever, lol. Either for themselves or for ordinary beings there. Well, it was just during these meetings and discussions that there rose among them, as it is in general proper to arise among learned beings there, what is called a burning question of the day. A question which in some way or other indeed interested them at that time to, as they say, their very marrow. So a question was burning in them. The question which chanced to become the burning question of the day, there you go, so vitally touched the whole being of every one of them that they even climbed down from their what are called pedestals and began discussing it not only with the learned like themselves, but also here, there, and everywhere with anyone who they chanced to come across. So the burning questions, yeah, okay, that's interesting. So the learned people would just talk to everybody and they'd all be talking about the same thing. The consequence was that an interest in this question gradually spread among all the ordinary three-brained beings then existing in Babylon. And by about the time we reached this city, it had become the question of the day for all the beings there. Not only did these learned themselves talk about and discuss this question, but similar conversations and fierce discussions proceeded like fury among the ordinary beings there also. Not just in the labs, but on the Twitters. There was much discussion. It was talked about and discussed by the young and old, by men and women, and even by the Babylonian butchers, lol. Exceedingly anxious were they, particularly the learned, to know about this question. What's the question? What's in the box, Gurdjieff? Before our arrival there, many of the beings existing in Babylon had ultimately even lost their reason on account of this question, and many were already candidates for, I'm going to lose my reason if you don't tell me the question. This burning question of the day was that both the sorry learned and also the ordinary beings of the city Babylon were very anxious to know whether they had a soul. Okay, this is important. Let's focus, guys. Focus up here. Bring it in. What's happening? Every possible kind of fantastic theory existed in Babylon upon this question, and more theories were being freshly cooked up. And every, as it is said there, catchy theory had, of course, its followers. Okay. So everyone had their own ideas, and each idea had a following. God, it sounds like politics, but like for metaphysics. Oh, they're a part of the soul camp. Well, we're a part of the forever soul camp and the maybe soul camp, and God. Although whole hosts of these various theories existed, there nevertheless were one and all based upon only two, but two quite opposite assumptions. One of these was called the atheistic, and the other the idealistic or dualistic. So materialism versus idealism. Things haven't changed. All the dualistic theories maintained the existence of the soul, and of course its immortality, and every possible kind of perturbation to it after the death of the being man. Okay? And all the atheistic theories maintained just the opposite. So basically people were like, when you die, you die, and other people were like, nah, when you die, you might come back. Your soul continues either into another life or reincarnates. This is basically, yeah, you know, what we're arguing about nowadays just became a burning question in Babylon, apparently. In short, my boy, when we arrived in the city of Babylon, there was then proceeding what is called the building of the Tower of Babel. Ooh, okay, so let's see what Gurdjieff says about this. Having uttered these words, Beelzebub became a little thoughtful, and then continued as follows. So Beelzebub just paused and was like, and then continued. Now, I wish to explain to you about the expression I just used, namely, the building of the Tower of Babel. This expression is very often used on your planet by the contemporary three-brained beings there also. Do we still kind of use that? I don't know if we use that anymore. I'm sure people do. I wish to the UN is a Tower of Babel. I wish to touch upon this expression frequently used there, and to elucidate it to you chiefly because, firstly, I chanced to be a witness at that time of all the events which gave rise to it, and secondly, because the history of the arising of this expression and its transubstantiation in the understanding of your contemporary physics. He just went off on a tangent now, talking about Tower of Babel talk. Jesus Christ. Favorites can very clearly and instructively elucidate to you that, thanks as always to the same abnormally established conditions of ordinary being existence, no precise information of events there which have indeed occurred to beings of former epochs ever reaches beings of later generations. And if, by chance, something like this expression does reach them, then the fantastic reason of your favorites constructs a whole theory on the basis of just one expression, such as this. So what is he saying? He's saying phrases that have multiple purposes sometimes perpetuate through time, but when they do, the multiple purposes get lost and only one thing remains, and so it kind of, the meaning of the phrase is warped, I guess is what he's saying. He's just talking about linguistic evolution. With the result that those illusory... Okay, when we've got a word here, being egoplasticuri. Egoplasticuri. I think your ego gets a plasty, if you're being enough. Or what they call psychic picturings. Okay, there you go. Psychic pictures are evoked through expressions, increase and multiply in their presences, owing to which there has arisen in the universe the strange, unique psyche of three-brained beings which every one of your favorites has. Okay. Well then, my boy, no, he doesn't say my boy. When we arrived in the city of Babylon, I began mixing with the various beings there and making my corresponding observations, in order to elucidate the question which had interested me. So the killing of, the destruction of other beings. Then, because almost everywhere I ran across the said learned beings who had gathered and met there in great numbers, it so fell out that I began associating with them alone, and made my observations through them, and also through their individualities. Among the number of the learned beings whom I met for my mentioned aim was also one named Hamolinadir. Hamolinadir. Hamol-inadir. Hamol. Also one named Hamol, who had also been brought there by compulsion from Egypt. That's not an Egyptian name. Come on, bruh. Come on. Okay, so an Egyptian guy called Ham. He met a guy called Ham in Babylon from Egypt. Well, during these meetings of ours, also the same relations were established between this terrestrial three-brained being, Ham, and myself, as in general are established everywhere between three-brained beings who frequently meet. So they became friends. This Ham was one of those learned there in the common presence of whom the factors of the impulses of a three-brained being which had passed to him by hereditary were not quite atrophied, so he still had a little bit of hope, faith, and love in him. Moreover, it turned out that during his preparatory age, the responsible beings around him had prepared him to be also more or less normally responsible. So he had an okay education, and he wasn't totally insane. It is necessary to notice that many learned beings of this kind were then in the city of Babylon, although this learned Hamolinader had his arising and preparation for becoming a responsible being just there in the city of Babylon, and descended from the race of beings there called Assyrian. Well, you just said he was from Egypt, bro. Yet he became learned in Egypt. Okay, so he was an Assyrian guy who went to Egypt to learn and then got captured and brought back to Babylon. Okay, cool. Where the highest school existing on earth was, at that time, was found, and which was called the School of Materializing Thought. So let me just read that again, because I got a little salty there. Descended from race being called Assyrian, yet he learned in Egypt. Okay, so in Egypt there was a school that taught you how to materialize thought. Very interesting, according to Gurdjieff. At the age he was when I first met him, he already had his eye in respect of rationally directing what is called the automatic psychic functioning of his common presence, at the maximum stability for three-centered beings of the planet Earth at that time. So he was actually quite developed for some unearthling, in consequence of which, during what is called his waking passive state, so the normal state that we move around during daily life, he had very definitely expressed being manifestations, as for instance, those called self-consciousness, impartiality, sincerity, sensibility of perception, alertness, and so forth. Okay, so he was a good candidate for like the occultants, for actually developing himself further. Soon after our arrival in Babylon, I began going with this Hamolinator to various what are called meetings of the mentioned learned beings, and listened to every kind of what they called reports upon the very question, which was then the question of the day, and which was the cause of the agitation of the minds of the whole of Babylon. This friend of mine, Hamolinator, was also very much excited about the said burning question. He was agitated and perplexed by the fact that both the already existing and the many newly appearing theories upon the question were all, in spite of their entirely contradictory proofs, equally convincing and equally plausible. So I think Gurdjieff's take, he's always going to go for the secret third thing. And I think he's going to do something like an in-between thing, like that. Soul exists, but you don't have it. You have to create it. So 99% of people are just going to dissolve back into the omnipresent Okidanok. You're going to dissolve back into the background ether of the universe, but some people who construct true individuality, that individuality can then perpetuate. That's where I think he's going to go with this. So and that's something we want to know. So this is interesting stuff. Let's keep our minds sharp for this. He said that those theories in which it was proved that we have a soul were very logically and convincingly expounded, and likewise those theories in which quite the contrary was proved were expounded no less logically and convincingly. So that you may be able to put yourself in the place of that sympathetic Assyrian, I shall also explain to you that in general on your planet, so on planet Earth then, he's saying your planet to Hassian, then in the city of Babylon as well, oh no, is he? Anyway, as well as the present time, all the theories on such a question as they call it of the beyond, or any other elucidation of details of any definite fact, are invented by those three-brained beings, there in whom most of the consequences of the Kundabuffer organ are completely crystallized. So most religions that are created by Hannes Musens, basically. Or that are perpetuated. Okay, all right. A lot of the ideas of what is in the beyond. You want to get into heaven? There's only one way to get into heaven. $29.95. Donate now. That kind of stuff is apparently Hannes Musen or Kundabuffer behavior. In consequence of which there actively functions in their presence that being property which they themselves call cunning. Owing to this, they consciously, of course, consciously only with a sort of reason which it has already become long ago proper for them alone to possess, and moreover merely automatically gradually acquire in their common presence the capacity for spotting the weakness of the psyche, of the surroundings and beings like themselves. So every moment a sucker is born. That kind of P.T. Barnum kind of attitude is the attitude of Hannes Musen. And this capacity gradually forms in them data which enable them, at times, to sense and even to understand the peculiar logic of the beings around them. And according to these data, they invent and propound one of their theories concerning this or that question. And because, as I have already told you, in most of the three-brained beings there, owing to the abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence established there by them themselves, the being function called instinctively to sense cosmic truths gradually atrophies. Then, if any one of them happens to devote himself to the detailed study of any one of these theories, he is bound, whether he wishes it or not, to be persuaded by it with the whole of his presence. So let me just read a little bit of that again. So the abnormal conditions, ordinary being existence established there by themselves, the being function called instinctively to sense cosmic truths gradually atrophies. So we all instinctually possess a capacity to sense truth. And this atrophies in us slowly. And so this allows us to be deceived. And what shall I say? The crescendo of this deception is when someone becomes the persuaded. When you meet someone who has become convinced, that is when their whole presence has been possessed by one of these ideas. Do not become the persuaded. Do not become the convinced. Well, self-delusion then. Yeah, basically. Well, self-delusion, external delusion, that's all the same thing. How do you defeat the delusion then? This is what we, let's see what he says. Well, my boy, I've said that almost as many times as friggin' trogo-bureaucratic. Already 7 of their months after our... Oh, just 7 months? You're not going to lay a crazy word like a somnambulum vibrations past and, oh, 7 of their months. Okay, yeah, cool. Arrival in the city of Babylon. I once went with this friend of mine there, Hamolinader, to what is called a General Learned Conference. This General Learned Conference had already been convened at that time by the learned beings previously brought there by force, and thus there were at this conference not only the learned forcibly assembled there by the mentioned Persian king, who in the meantime had already got over his craze about the science of alchemy and forgotten all about it, but many other learned also from other communities who had voluntarily gathered, as they then said, for the sake of science. All this General Learned Conference that day, the reporters spoke by a lot. This is also one thing I should mention. To be a traditionalist, to like tradition, what tradition are you talking about? Because this is... Gurdjieff is in a way a traditionalist. Not really, but he's in a way a traditionalist, but he's in a sense a proper traditionalist, i.e. an actual traditionalist isn't someone who just likes, I don't know, women in floral dresses and going back to like a farming set or something. A capital T traditionalist doesn't just see, like, fetishize ancient cultures. A true traditionalist realizes that writing itself is a form of degeneration. Therefore, written history is all degenerate. Therefore, everything after 10,000 BC is degenerate history and is not traditional history. So true traditionalists really love mythology and see mythology as something truer than history. And it's funny, Gurdjieff is just like, you know, prehistory, kind of like there was still the Achaldan society around, you know, Atlantis, that was what, you know, this great Achaldan society, there was still, you know, there's still problems, Kundabuffa, Organ Crystal, but now we're in history and it's just like the learned are all idiots. All of them are idiots. And we look back and, you know, Babylon, Egypt, you know, these wise cultures, and it's like, and go just like, no, they were all dumb. All dumb. All dumb. I just find that a little funny. Anyway, keeping our minds on the prize. My friend, Hamolindir, also had to report about some topic, and therefore drew a lot, and it fell to him to speak fifth. It's interesting. I wonder if 5 has a correspondence with something. The reporters who preceded him either reported upon new theories they had invented, or they criticized theories already existing and known to everybody. At last came the turn of this sympathetic Assyrian. He ascended what is called the rostrum. I assume that's like a podium? A raised platform. Yep. For which to make a public speech. Alright, is that like... No, okay. Still used today? It doesn't say archaic or anything? Okay, rostrum. Standing on that rostrum, baby. Sing it out. As he did, so some attendants hung up a notice about it, indicating on which subjects that the given reporter would speak. It was custom at that time to do so. Speaker stands, yes, thank you, True River King. The notice announced that the reporter had taken as the theme of his report the insatiability of human reason. Thereupon, this terrestrial friend of mine first expiated on the kind of structure which, in his opinion, the human head brain has, and in which cases and in what manner various impressions are perceived by the other brains of man. So, doctrine of three brains. Let's see what he says. And how only after definite what is called agreement between all the brains are total results impressed on this head brain. Okay. So a key to memory or learning is balance. So we have three brains within us, and unless they're balanced, we can't impress things properly. Or agreement, maybe balance. This is interesting. He doesn't say balance. I'll take it back. I'll take it all back. He doesn't say balance. He says agreement. So there needs to be a communication between all the brains, the emotional, the motor instinctive, and the intellectual brain. And I mean, if you think about, learning and education back in the day, all of those things were interconnected. You learnt, through music, you learnt math. Music theory is basically algebra. Through then songs, you learnt proper grammar and rhetoric at the same time. Even stories have to have a logical sequence and all things like that. Through music, you learn math, then you can learn geometry, and through that, it extends up into architecture. You can then apply geometry to the world and become an architect. All of the learning was interconnected through music. You then have dance and the body. Our three brains, education struck our three brains all at the same time, or at least all the parts of our three brains. And so things were able to be impressed and memorized in the head brain more easier back in the day. I'm not sure if that's where he's going, but he's saying there's something very interesting here. He spoke calmly at first, but the longer he spoke, the more agitated he became, until his voice rose to a shout. And shouting, he began to criticize the reason in man. Ooh, dangerous. Imagine doing that nowadays. Reason sucks. Rationality sucks. Kick your reason to the curb. Embrace the impossible. Embrace the invisible. Do the impossible. Row, row. And at the same time, he mercilessly criticized his own reason. Reason attacking reason. I kind of like this guy. Let's see where it goes. Maybe he's going to die now. Still continuing to shout, he very logically and convincingly demonstrated the instability of reason. Did I say insatiability? Anyway, instability and fickleness of man's reason, and showed in detail how easy it is to prove and convince this reason of anything you like. Hey, there you go. Break it. Although in the midst of the shouting of this terrestrial friend of mine, Hamolinader, his sobbing could be heard nevertheless. Even while sobbing, he continued to shout further. He said, so he gave a passionate speech. Reason capitalized. Why? Where was it capitalized? But yeah, I think it's just, like that age of reason thing. This may be, I'm not, once again, did this happen? Or is this Gurdjieff basically dunking on the rationalists and people who worship reason? To every man, and also, of course, to me, it's quite easy to prove anything. All that is necessary to know is which shocks and which associations to arouse in the other human brains, while one or other truth is being proved. It is very easily possible even to prove to man that our whole world, and of course the people in it, are nothing but an illusion, and that the authenticity and reality of the world are only a corn, and moreover the corn growing on the big toe of our left foot. Besides this corn, absolutely nothing exists in the world. Everything only seems, and even then only the only then to the psychopaths. At this point in the speech, this sympathetic terrestrial three-brained being, an attendant offered him a bowl of water, and after he eagerly drank the water, he continued to speak, but now more calmly. He said further, "Take myself as an example. I am not an ordinary learned man. I am known by all Babylon, and by people of many other towns, as an exceedingly learned and wise man. I finished the course of study higher than which has never yet existed on the earth, and which it is almost impossible will ever exist again." Okay, wise man. Let's see where he goes. "But what then has the highest development given to my reason in respect of that question which already during 1 or 2 years is driven driving all Babylonians insane. This reason of mine, which has received the highest development, has given me during this general dementia concerning the question of the soul nothing else but 5 days a week. During this time I have very attentively seriously followed all the old and new theories about the soul, and there is not a single theory with the author of which I do not inwardly agree, since all of them are very logically and plausibly expounded, and such reason as I have cannot but agree with their logic and plausibility. So reason is not enough, is what he's coming towards. Let me keep going. Let's keep going. During this time, I have even myself written a very lengthy work on this question of the beyond. And many of those present here have surely become acquainted with my logical mentation, and most probably there is not one of you here who does not envy this logical mentation of mine. So he's basically just saying, like, yeah, I'm the Aristotle here, you're all subs, I'm the top. And yet, you know what's kind of funny? Things like this happen again and again, almost as a recurrence. This is also like kind of Wittgenstein, you know, the story of Ludwig Wittgenstein. He basically entered philosophy in Austria, and everyone was like, no, we have no idea what you're talking about, bro. Go to England and learn from this guy, Bertrand Russell. He's the genius of the time. He can teach you. Wittgenstein goes, learns from Bertrand Russell, writes a book called the Tractatus, claims he has finished philosophy, leaves, refuses to elaborate, comes back years later, writes a book on certainty, destroys his original philosophy, is like, reason is not enough. You're all lame. Language doesn't represent the world. Logic is insufficient. Absolutely, the entire world of analytical philosophy has a meltdown. And yeah, Wittgenstein just leaves again. What does he say? His like dying words was something like, if I was to be born again, I wish to be born a star. Dies. What a Chad. What a Chad. Things like this happen all the time. The person with the most logic and reason realizes the limits of logic and reason. Yet at the same time, I now honestly declare to you all that concerning this question of the beyond, I myself, with the whole of the knowledge that has been accumulated in me, am neither more nor less than just an idiot cubed. He realizes he's an idiot. This is the most important lesson that you can learn in the beginning. When you're a kid, there's always this moment when you realize, wait a second, my parents are idiots. And then you go, wait a second, my teachers are idiots. And then you're out in the world and you're like, someone's got to know what's up. Maybe scientists, maybe politicians. No, they're all idiots too. And then finally, once you've realized that everybody, even the holy men and the philosophers, are idiots, the final thing you need to learn is that, oh my God, I am also an idiot. And if you don't learn that final thing, you're screwed. You'll still make mistakes. There is now proceeding among us in the city of Babylon the general public building of a tower, by means of which to ascend to heaven, and there to see with our own eyes what goes on there. Okay, so this is his idea of why the Tower of Babylon was built. So I guess the Persian king is Nimrod? Is that what he's saying? The Babylonian king? This tower is being built of bricks which outwardly all look alike, but which are made of quite different materials. Among these bricks, the final thing you learn, you are in the movie Idiocracy. Yes, Syria. Yes. Among these bricks are bricks of iron, wood, and also of dough, and even of eider down? God damn, let's go. What is this? What is eider down? The eider is hot? What? Embedding. Okay. Okay, so it's something soft. It's pillow soft. Okay, so bricks. Some are iron, some are wood, some are dough, and eider brown. Well then, at the present time, a stupendously enormous tower is being built of such bricks, right in the center of Babylon, and every more or less conscious person, duck feathers, there you go, must bear in mind that sooner or later this tower will certainly fall and crush not only all the people of Babylon, but also everything else that is there. As I personally still wish to live and have no desire to be crushed by this Babylonian tower, I shall therefore now immediately go away from here, and all of you do as you please. He uttered these last words while leaving, and ran off, and since that time I never saw that sympathetic Assyrian again. You're all reason sucks. You're all lame. I'm leaving before your tower kills everyone. Refuses to elaborate. Leaves. Based. In the Bible, the Tower of Babel is built of bricks and slime. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. As I later learned, he left the city of Babylon the same day and forever, and went to Nineveh, and existed somewhere there to a ripe old age. I also ascertained that this Hamolinator was never again occupied with sciences, and that he spent his existence only in planting Chungari, which in contemporary language is called maize. Not stone and mortar, yeah. So corn. He became a corn farmer, oh my god. Well, my boy, the speech of this Hamolinator at first made such a deep impression upon the beings there, that for almost a month they went about, as it is said there, down in the mouth. I don't know what that expression is. Whether they were just down in the mouth? Or they were just silent? Anyway. Let's check it out. These old man sayings, which I have no idea. Down in the mouth. Unhappy, dejected. Okay, there you go. Everyone was dejected. And when they met each other, they could speak of nothing else, but only of the various passages from this speech which they remembered and repeated. They repeated them so often that several of Hamolinator's phrases spread among the ordinary beings of Babylon and became sayings for ordinary daily existence. Oh, there you go. Sad. Some of his phrases reached even contemporary beings of the planet Earth, and among them there is also the phrase, the building of the Tower of Babel. There you go. Tangent concluded. Contemporary beings now already quite clearly picture to themselves that once upon a time a certain tower was built in this said city of Babylon to enable beings to ascend in their planetary bodies to God himself. And the contemporary beings of the planet Earth also say, and are quite persuaded, that during the building of this Babylonian tower a number of tongues were confused. In general, there reached the contemporary beings of the planet Earth a great many of such isolated expressions, uttered or fixed by various sensible beings of former epochs concerning certain details of a complete understanding from the epoch when the center of culture was Babylon, as well as from the other epochs and from your favorites of recent centuries, simply on the basis of these scraps, have with their already quite nonsensical reason concocted such cock and bull stories as our arch-cunning Lucifer himself might envy. Ooh. Lucifer, first mentioned. It's very interesting. So, Gurdjieff's story of the Tower of Babel isn't about pride. It's almost like a kind of a spiritual positivism or a spiritual empiricism. They are so obsessed with the nature of the soul that they deliberately wanted to create their science, their outward science, wanted to build a ladder or a building to heaven so that they could see souls and see what goes on there themselves. They wanted to build something to pierce the veil. That's very interesting. So it was a different kind of desire, not just a kind of a weird pride or something. Among the many teachings, then, current in Babylon concerning the question of the beyond, two had a large number of adherents, though these teachings had nothing in common. And it was precisely these two teachings which began to pass from generation to generation, and to confuse their being sane mentation, which had already been confused enough without them. Although in the course of their transmission from generation to generation, the details of both these teachings underwent change, nevertheless the fundamental ideas contained in them remained unchanged, and have even reached down to contemporary times. One of these two teachings, which then had many adherents in Babylon, was just the dualistic and the other the atheistic, so that in one of them it was proved that in beings there is the soul, and in the other quite the opposite, namely, that they have nothing of the kind. In the dualistic or idealistic teaching, it was said that within the coarse body of being man there is a fine and invisible body, which is just the soul. This fine body of man is immortal, that is to say, it is never destroyed. This fine body or soul, it was said further, must make a corresponding payment for every action of the physical body, whether voluntary or involuntary, and every man already at birth consists of these two bodies, namely the physical body and the soul. Further, it was said that as soon as a man is born, two invisible spirits immediately perch upon his shoulder. On his right shoulder sits a good spirit, a spirit of good, called an angel. On his left, a second spirit, a spirit of evil, called a devil. From the very first day, these spirits, the spirit of good and the spirit of evil, record in their notebooks all the manifestations of the man, the spirit sitting on his right shoulder recording all those called his good manifestations or good deeds, and the spirit sitting on his left shoulder, the evil. Okay, part of the course. Among the duties of these two spirits is that of suggesting and to compelling a man to do more of those manifestations which are in their respective domains. The spirit on the right constantly strives to make man refrain from doing those actions which are in the domain of the opposite spirit, perforce, more of those in his own domain, and the spirit on the left does the same, but vice versa. In this strange teaching, it was further said that these two spirit rivals are always combating each other, and that each strives with might and main that the man should do more of those actions which are in his domain. Okay. Inside you are two wolves. When the man dies, these spirits leave his physical body on the earth and take his soul to God, who exists somewhere up in heaven. There, up in heaven, this God sits surrounded by his devoted archangels and angels, and suspended in front of him is a pair of scales. On each side of the scale, spirits stand on duty. On the right stand the spirits who are called servants of paradise, and these are the angels, and on the left, the servants of hell, and these are the devils. So, he's got devils in heaven, what's going on? The spirits which have sat on the man's shoulder all his life bring his soul after death to God, and God then takes from their hands the notebooks in which the notes have been recorded of all the man's actions. He places them on the pans of the scales. On the right pan, he puts the notebook of the angel, on the left pan, the notebook of the devil. According to the pan which falls, God commands the spirits on duty standing on the given side to take the soul into their charge, so whichever book is heavier and has the most notes in it. In the charge of the spirits standing on duty, on the right, is just the place called paradise. It is a place of indescribable beauty and splendoriferousness. In that paradise are magnificent fruits in abundance and endless quantities of fragrant flowers and enchanting sounds of cherubic songs and Sephardic music, constantly echoing in the air, and many other things were also enumerated, whose outer reactions, according to the perceptions and cognitions abnormally inherent in the three-brained beings of that strange planet, are likely to evoke in them, as they say, great satisfaction. That is to say, the satisfaction of those needs formed in their common presences, which are criminal for three-centered beings to possess, and the totality of which have driven out from their presences everything, without exception, that was put into them by our common Father, and which it is imperative for every three-brained being to possess. In the charge of the spirits standing on duty on the left of the scales, who according to this Babylonian teaching are the devils, there is what is called hell. Concerning hell, it was said that it is a place without vegetation, always unimaginably hot without a single drop of water. In that hell sounds constantly echo of fearful cacophony and infuriated offensive abuse. So it sounds like this doctrine of heaven and hell, he's saying, was started in Babylon and has perpetuated itself as a seed from there onwards. And everywhere there are instruments of every conceivable torture, from the rack and the wheel to instruments for lacerating bodies and mechanically rubbing them with salt, and so on of the same kind. All the fun stuff. In the Babylonian idealistic teaching, it was minutely explained that in order that his soul should enter this paradise, the man must constantly strive while on earth to provide more material for the notebook for the spirit angel sitting on his right shoulder. Otherwise, there would be more material for the records of the spirit sitting on the left shoulder, in which case such a man's soul would inevitably go to this most awful hell. Here Hassian could not restrain himself and suddenly interrupted with the following words. And which of their manifestations do they consider good and which bad? Yeah, exactly, that's a problem. Beelzebub looked at his grandson with a very strange look, shaking his head. Said as follows. Concerning this, which being manifestations are there on your planet considered good and which bad, two independent understandings, having nothing in common with each other, have existed from the most ancient times up to the present period, having passed from generation to generation. The first of these understandings exists there and passes from one generation to another among such three-brained beings there, as were those members of the society of Caldan, on the continent Atlantis, and such as those who, although of another kind, several centuries later, after the Transapalnean perturbation, acquired almost the same in the foundations of their common presences, and who were called initiates. The first of these understandings exists there under the following formulation. Oh, Jesus Christ. So I'm just like, I'm getting a little crazy, Gurge of crazy now. I'm just like, oh. Okay, give us your morality and ethics, bro. Let's see. Every action of man is good in the objective sense of it. It is done according to his conscience, and every action is bad if from it he later experiences remorse. And the second understanding arose there soon after the wise invention of the great king Canusian, which invention, passing from generation to generation through ordinary beings there, gradually spread over almost the whole planet under the name of morality. Here it will be very... So basically, the Accaldans basically have a kind of an inner ethos that they're guided by, where everyone else has a morality that's blanket over them, like a bunch of rules that they follow. Here it will be very interesting to notice a particularity of this morality, which was grafted upon it at the very beginning of its arising, and which ultimately became part and parcel of it. What this said particularity of terrestrial morality is, you can easily represent to yourself and understand if I tell you that both inwardly and outwardly it acquired exactly that unique property which belongs to the being bearing the name chameleon. So it shifts depending on its exterior. I guess that's morality changes depending on the country of origin? Is that what that's where he's going with this? And the oddity and peculiarity of this said particularity of the morality there, especially of contemporary morality, is that its functioning automatically depends entirely on the moods of the local authorities. There you go. Which moods in their turn depend almost automatically on the state of the four sources of actions existing there under the names of mother-in-law, digestion, John, Thomas, and so basically your moods. The mood of the culture depends what's moral. At one point in time, if you wore a mask into a store, you were told to leave. At another point in time, if you didn't wear a mask into a store, you were not allowed in. Morality changes depending on the mood. The second Babylonian teaching, which then had many followers, and which passing from generation to generation also reached your contemporary favorites, was, on the contrary, one of the atheistic teachings of that period. In this teaching, by the terrestrial Hannes-Musian candidates of that time, it was stated that there is no God in the world, and moreover no soul in man, and hence that all those talks and discussions about the soul are nothing more than the deliriums of sick visionaries. So all atheists are Hannes-Musians inherently. It was further maintained that there exists in the world only one special law of mechanics, according to which everything that exists passes from one form into another. That is to say, the results which arise from certain preceding causes are gradually transformed and become causes for subsequent results. So cause and effect is the only thing that's real. There is no God. What you gonna do? Man also is therefore only a consequence of some proceeding. So this is determinism. Preceding cause, and in his turn must, as a result, be a cause of certain consequences. Yeah, so determinists will say, you have I'm here sitting at a table, I'm going to put one of my hands down. It could be the left or the right, but whichever one I choose, they will merely say everything that happened in the universe determined which one I chose. So if I put the left one down, they don't say I chose it, they say the universe forced me to choose it. And if I put down the right one, they would say the same thing. Why? Because determinists are no, I'm not going to say that. Anyway, further it was said that even what are called supernatural phenomena really perceptible to most people are all nothing but these same results ensuing from the mentioned special laws of mechanics. The full comprehension. I was determined to rob you. Don't be mad, bro. Exactly. Exactly. The full comprehension of this law by, this is the problem with determinism, is if everything's determined, then you can't be, can you truly be held responsible for your actions? If you take free will out of the equation, what do the laws of society really mean? Pure reason depends on the gradual, impartial, all-round acquaintance with its numerous details, which can be revealed to a pure reason in proportion to its development. But as regards the reason of man, this is only the sum of all the impressions perceived by him, from which there gradually arise in him data for comparison, deductions, and conclusion. As a result of all this, so it also has to say, like, within us, we all have the same human nature. Therefore, if you give everyone the same impressions, they'll be able to make the same comparisons and deductions and all arrive at the same conclusions. This is inherently false as well. Pretty much everything from Buddhism to Gurdjieff's studies basically says, no, there is no fixed human nature. We are in a constant state of flux, which is also good, because if we get trapped or crystallize in a state, you can also uncrystallize that state. So there is no fixed human nature. So having a kind of laws for everyone is also technically wrong. As a result of all of this, he obtains more information concerning all kinds of similarly repeated facts around him, which in the general organization of man are in their turn material for the formation of definite convictions in him. Thus, from all this, there is formed in man reason, that is to say, from his own subjective psyche. Cool. Whatever... goddamn mouse wheel. Whatever may have been said in these two teachings about the soul, and whatever maleficent means had been prepared by those learned beings assembled there from almost the whole planet for the gradual transformation of the reason of their descendants into a veritable mill of nonsense, it would not have been, in the objective sense, totally calamitous. But the whole objective terror is concealed in the fact that there later resulted from these teachings a great evil, not only for their descendants alone, but maybe even for everything existing. So atheism is satanic. The point is that during the mentioned agitation of minds of that time in the city of Babylon, these learned beings, owing to their collective wiseacrings, acquired in their presences, in addition to all they already had, a further mass of new data for Hasnamusian manifestations. And when they dispersed and went home to their own countries, they began everywhere, of course, unconsciously, to propagate like contagious bacilli all these notions, which altogether ultimately totally destroyed the last remnants and even the traces of all the results of the holy labors of the very saintly Ashiata Shayamash, who we have no idea, once again, we have no idea who this is. It's not Jesus, it's not Muhammad, it's not Buddha. This is either a composite creation that Gurdjieff has made himself, or perhaps someone from prehistory that we don't know about, from a culture which has been destroyed, that Gurdjieff somehow knows about. I always like to mention, I should find that article I read ages ago. Some guy did like a deep dive into all of the references of Ashiata Shayamash in Beelzebub's Tales, and corresponded it historically, and he concluded that Ashiata Shayamash is Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, but we'll see. So whenever this name pops up, also pay attention. The remnants, that is to say, of those wholly consciously suffering labors which he intentionally actualized for the purpose of creating, just for three-centered beings, such special external conditions of ordinary being existence, in which alone the maleficent consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer could gradually disappear from their presences, so that in their place there could be gradually acquired those properties proper to the presence of every kind of three-brained being. So Ashiata Shamash, this entire paragraph here, Ashiata Shamash gave us teachings so we could eliminate the consequences of the organ Kundabuffer, whose whole presence is an exact similitude of everything in the universe. Cool. Another result of the diverse wiseacrings by those learned beings of the earth in the city of Babylon concerning the question of the soul was that soon after my fifth appearance in person on the surface of that planet of yours, this, in its turn, center of culture of theirs, the incomparable, indeed magnificent Babylon, was also, as it is said there, swept away from the face of the earth to its very foundations. Pardon me. Not only was the city of Babylon itself destroyed, but everything also that had been acquired and accomplished by the beings who had, during many of their centuries, formerly existed there. So R.I.P. Babylon, we lost everything. Cero says, there is a possibility that the name is an anagram. Possibly. That's possible as well. I think there's a lot of people have done deep dives on Ashiata Shamash, so what it anagrams to, I don't know. In the name of justice, I must now say that the prime initiative for the destruction of the holy labors of Ashiata Shamash did not spring, however, from these learned of the earth, who were then assembled in the city of Babylon, but from the invention of a learned being, very well known there, who also existed there on the continent Asia, several centuries before these Babylonian events, namely from the invention of a being named, okay, this is so this black magician destroyed the teachings of Ashiata Shamash with his atheist materialist doctrine. And his name is Lentro Hamsenin, who, having coated his higher being part into a definite unit, and having perfected himself by reason up to the required gradation of objective reason, also became one of those 313 Hanasmusian eternal individuals who now exist on the small planet bearing the name Retribution. Okay. So this is, there's a planet called Retribution somewhere in the universe, which is literal hell, where Hanasmusans get taken after death to, what would you call it? Contain, what do you call it when you contain something? When something's been contaminated. It's like a hazard facility for the universe, planet Retribution. And so there are 313 Hanasmusian, eternal Hanasmusians there. Very interesting. And one of them was created on our planet Earth. About this Lenthro Hamsanian, I shall also tell you, since the information concerning him will serve to elucidate for your understanding the strange psyche of those three-brained beings who exist on that peculiar remote planet. But I shall tell you about this Lenthro Hamsanian only when I have finished speaking about the very saintly Ashiata Shamash. As the information relating to this now already most very saintly individual Ashiata Shamash and his activities in connection with this planet of yours is most important and of the utmost value for your understanding of the peculiarities of the psyche of these three-brained beings who have taken your fancy and who breed on the planet Earth. So what are we going to learn about next? Chapter 25, the very saintly Ashiata Shamash sent from above to the earth. Very interesting. Oh, look at that first sentence. That's all, my boy. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, though. Good God. That was another big one, but not as big as last week. Woo! So that was a journey. Thank you for coming along, everybody. Once again, if you want to help out with the channel in these efforts, please do consider subscribing, liking, maybe giving a one-time donation via PayPal or the Ko-fi account. And there is YouTube memberships for people who want a little bonuses. What as Ciro says, Shamash is an Akkadian estimate. Oh yeah, that's true. Shamash. I'll have to think about that some more. Anyway, I'm doing my outro now. You're distracting me, Sarah. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. See y'all again next week. Yeah, we'll pick up where we left off. Goodbye.